Hey folks, it's Johnny here coming to you from right outside of Washington, D.C. and today we are going to talk about marking. Let's get into it. This video is going to be split into two parts. First, we're going to discuss some basic keys to marking, and then we're going to get into the triangle mark, which is a little bit of a higher level way to think about marking. There are three keys to marking in the game of Ultimate. The first is shuffling, never lunging. The second is staying square and stable. And the third is keeping our arms wide with active hands. We're going to break down each one in depth moving forward. First, we're going to talk about shuffling, not lunging. And what we mean by that is when our thrower pivots, instead of lunging over to cover the distance, we want to make sure that we're staying square and shuffling over. And then when he pivots back, we're shuffling the other way. Feet a little bit more than shoulder width apart, and we're shuffling to stop rather than lunging, because if we lunge, we can see what happens. Now I'm off balance all the way out here, and Luke gets an open throw to whatever side he's trying to throw to. The second thing we're going to talk about is keeping our arms wide and keeping our hands active. And what I mean by that is more often than not, when we're on the mark, I think it feels like we're just going through the motions and we're not actually trying to get a block. But what we want to do is make our body as big as possible in the upper body, keep our arms wide, and make sure our hands are following the path of the disc up and down so that we're actually challenging the throw and hopefully maybe even get a hand block. So here I'm keeping my arms active, I'm shuffling, my hands are following the disc, and we're trying to get a block. Okay. And number three is related to number one. When we're shuffling and we're not lunging, we're also staying square, stable, and balanced to make sure that we're being the most efficient that we can be with our movements. So again, I'm in a nice athletic stance, I'm squared to Luke, and as I shuffle, I'm trying to keep that squared position while working in all three of our tips. Now that we've broken down these three keys in isolation, we can talk about the point of the mark, and that is to take away roughly half of the field, which is what we call the break side. Now that we've looked at the basics of marking, we can start to talk about the triangle mark. The triangle mark is basically a way to think about our marking progression as our thrower pivots, and we're going to look at an example right now. AJ, you want to help me? Okay, so when we're thinking about the triangle mark now, we're going to think of it as a progression of movements to help us be as efficient as we can on the mark while taking away as much space as possible. So I'm starting out, if AJ's holding a righty flick, I want to start out all the way over to make sure that I'm challenging this throw, not necessarily even with my hand, but with my elbow. So I'm pretty far out here because pivoting over is going to take him some time. Now when he pivots over, I'm going to shuffle across, straight across on a straight line, and take away the backhand with my body and my elbow. Now notice the difference between that movement, so straight across, and this movement, which is actually encroaching into AJ's space and making it harder for me to take away more of the field. So this movement is not going to work because, as we can see, AJ can get around my body a lot easier. So we want to play the angles and go straight across and take away as much space as possible. Now to complete the triangle, when AJ pivots back, instead of going straight across on one plane, I'm going to pivot a little bit downfield and play the angles once more. So pivot back across, and I'm playing the angles here and then snapping tight. So let's do that again, the whole progression for a flick. So he's starting out here, he pivots over, he comes back, and then I snap. And we can do that as many times as we want to take away as much space as possible. On the backhand side, it looks pretty similar, but he's starting over here. I'm not going to commit quite as much because the flick from here is a little bit easier to pivot to and a little faster. So I'm going to come out here, and then he pivots back, and then I snap, just starting a little bit more onto the flick side than I would in the reverse orientation. Three keys to triangle marking successfully are correlating your movements around the triangle with the movement of the thrower's off foot, snapping fast, and making sure that when we're moving around the triangle, we're thinking of blocking with our elbow. Now let's see what we mean with each of those. In terms of our 3 keys to triangle marking, the first is correlating our movements to the thrower's off foot. So not the pivot foot, the other one. And the way I know that AJ's committing to his pivot is not what he's doing with the disc, not what he's doing with the shimmy up here, but what he's doing with his off foot. So I know if that foot's out here that I have to block for this. I know when that foot moves, I have to come, and I'm just tracking that foot with my movements around the triangle. Our second tip is block with the elbow, and what I mean by that is I don't want to see a half-hearted hand out to take away the throw. I want us to be over all the way across so that we could stop the throw with our elbow, and as he pivots across, same thing, and same thing back this way. And that's just a way to remember to shuffle as much as we can and not be lazy. The third and arguably the most important key of the triangle mark is snap fast. And what we mean by that is once we go through our progression, come out here, and then I take away this angle here, I'm so far away that I'm not putting a lot of pressure on AJ as the thrower. So once we take this away for a split second, we want to snap back fast so that we are taking away as much of the field as possible. We're not staying out here because this is giving him too much room, too much respect. We don't want that. Another higher level tip that we can think about is adding in a low kick to the end of our shuffling motion to be more efficient with our coverage and to have our arms and our feet working together. This way, we can take away as much of the field as possible in the most efficient movement. And an illustration of that last tip, when we're shuffling, we're gonna kick the foot out to be as efficient as we can, arms and legs working together, is let's say we're marking on the backhand side. If AJ pivots around, I'm gonna add just a little kick to the end of my shuffle so that if he goes low, I have it covered with my kick, and if he goes high, I can get it with my hand. Coming back to the other side, I can give a little kick at the end of my shuffle, and we'll have an example of that in the film at the end as well. Now let's take a look at a couple examples that we found on film. The first one is going to be a clip of Jeremy Hess in truck stop versus Rhino at Pro Championships 2021.
Observer Sam Shapiro stepping in there. Friedman again, and that Hess got a piece of it.
The things that I want to emphasize here are how active Jeremy's hands are on the mark, and also how he does a great job of shuffling to block and stay square while he's doing so. This second example is of Scandal versus Brute Squad at the 2019 US Open.
Our first year with Brute Squad after we played the last few years with Atlanta Ozone, as we see Lauren Allen stuff Synchrope at the throw with a foot block.
As we can see here, the defender does a great job of incorporating a low kick into her shuffle, which eventually gets the block. That's it for us today on how to mark. Let me know what you think of this video, and I hope it's helpful. All right, until next time, peace.